And we're now turning to our special guest this morning, a pioneering NASA astronaut, a physician, and an engineer, Mae Jemison. Thank you for joining us this morning. I just want to start first with a comment about what space exploration looks like these days, because for most of us in the news, at least, when we think about space exploration, we think about billionaires and private companies. How do you see this? Do you see it as a positive, as a negative? And does space need to remain a little bit accessible to the public?
So I think that image of space exploration is one that is not really applicable. So one of the things we need to know about space exploration is it's involved in everything, in so many things that we do. So we are looking at probes that go into deep space, or probes that circle the Earth, that orbit the Earth and give us information back here. When we start to look at space exploration, we think of it about being for rocket scientists and billionaires. That's not true. It isn't just for that. A lot of the work I do is about how do we bring other people into space. The interesting thing is when space exploration started out, it required the will and the funding of countries in order to make it happen. And in order to push further than we are now in low Earth orbit, it's going to take more of the same. So when you look at space exploration, think of being able to look back at your crops, right? And helping with agriculture, for minerals, for putting together roads, right? To learning about other planets, which help us to learn how the Earth evolves. Think of space as a platform for studying biology. And so the space has to be accessible. There was one of the things that the accessibility came from who's involved, who picks astronauts, who pick projects to go. Who are the gatekeepers? And so I think we have to take back this idea about who the gatekeepers are, gatekeepers being those folks who say yay or nay. And just remember that we, the public around the world, funded all of the development of this. So we have every right to be involved. And most of my work has to do with making that accessibility broader and expanding it.
You mentioned something about who goes into space. Obviously, for those who know you, they remember that year, 1992, the first African-American woman in space. You were in space at that time. How has diversity evolved in space exploration? You were talking about the fact that we need to keep having as many people, as different people. Do you think it's much different these days? And how has that influenced maybe space exploration?
So when I went into space, I was actually the first woman of color anywhere in the world to go into space, which was just incredible for me, who as a little girl had followed space exploration, just assumed by the time I got there that there would be lots of different people, right? But I think that what's happened is when we think about space, I still want us to stop thinking just about astronauts. I mean, being an astronaut is cool. I wanted to go into space, and we do a lot of work and we can share ideas. But really, space is about what do we use as a platform to make more things happen? So what has changed? So we've had multiple women of color who've gone into flight. We've had women who have crewed the shuttle, who've been the commanders aboard the International Space Station. So when you look at the crew of Artemis 2 that's going to launch perhaps on April 1st or so, we've had more people going up that way. But for me, the diversity, the expansion has been when we look around the world and we see countries around the world who have the capability to put up probes to look back at the Earth. At one time, we had 3 probes arrive into Mars that came from 3 different countries back in 2020, right? We had a probe from Qatar, from the U.S., and not from Qatar, I'm sorry, from the UAE, from India, and from the United States arriving at Mars. How amazing, right? But what do we do with that? My concern is, again, that when we start to look at this and we tally it up, because billionaires get more press, right, than the other folks, that we have to use different metrics for what we see as success. Some kind of way we have to return to the metrics of what do we do to better humanity. And that's part of space. My work right now, I lead a project called 100-Year Starship, which is about ensuring we have the capabilities for human interstellar flight going from our star to another star within 100 years. Doesn't mean we're going to launch the Starship Enterprise, but we have the capabilities. Why is that important? Because we have to do things in ways where we generate so much more energy than we've ever done. We have to be able to understand, how do we not use that energy to hurt each other, right? And I did this outside of NASA. After I left NASA, I just really wanted to use my energy to push things forward and include the humanities, include the social sciences up front and center in how we develop the sciences and engineering.
You talked a lot about what these flights, these probes do for the living Earth, how much you can bring. What would be, I mean, I think we all think about the impact or the influence it can have, the research on the evolution of the environment, for example. How important are these probes, for example, in fighting climate change for you?
So by making us aware, being able to document whether or not it's the ice caps receding, being able to see the change in forestry, lands denuded, agriculture. But there's another thing that it also does. When we're in microgravity, so you can grow different kinds of protein crystals that have, in fact, we can learn more about the human body in weightlessness. We can learn more about how diseases are transmitted, because you can look at the landscape in places where you might have vector-borne diseases. You can tell whether it's malaria, whether it's schistosomiasis, whether it's Lyme disease. You can actually spot some of these things from up above the Earth.
And how do you, I mean, obviously, you were talking about the fact that space is not just astronauts. How do you get new generations to care, to be involved, to want to follow that path in research, for example? How do you motivate those young generations?
So here's the deal. An Ashanti proverb says, no one shows a child the sky. So that's common to all of us. Everybody likes space. They don't necessarily want to go. And in fact, the vast, vast, vast majority of people who are involved in space exploration are not flying in space. So I think it's by allowing them to maintain that energy. What space does for us, and what a lot of science and exploration does for us, even if wherever it is, it gives us that adrenaline rush. It gives us the ability to think of further possible things. I think it's really about trying to pursue something extraordinary that creates a better world today. When we understand that we can make the world better, we can make our lives better by understanding we're fully part of this planet, right? We're fully part of the universe, that we have this opportunity not just to fight over these, things and destroy each other because we see the world as smaller, but to understand that we have the ability to make it larger, more inclusive every day.
Do you worry about, for example, in the United States, obviously we talked about the billionaires, the private companies, the fact that there have been cuts to funding across the board, cuts to education, all of that combined. Does that make you worried about the future of this field by and large?
So all of those things, it's not just about space. So
Exactly.
What I was lucky to do is I had a social sciences background as well. Medicine requires social sciences. You have to understand people's culture, how folks have access to information. Education is fundamental to all of us. Anyone who does not understand that education is fundamental and that we as adults, as nations, must fund education for all children, equally, give opportunities to develop the full scope of our talent, we're missing something. It is not just about space. I'm not just about space. I love space. I love technology and design, but I understand that we're humans, right? We're part of this world. I can't do this by myself. Nobody can. All the people who are developing AI, what do? They're training it by using our experiences, our knowledge base. Why wouldn't we want to train our children as well? Why wouldn't we want to put that energy in making sure they understand?